Okay, I've started the recording. Hi, everybody. It's good to have you all here. I'll go ahead and share the agenda. Everybody is putting their name and their organization into the chat. And we're going to start with a guest speaker about the PPAC mission requirements and application. Who do we have here today who's going to speak about that?
Hi, I'm filling in for LaShonda, who has another meeting, so she can't make it.
Okay. Thank you, Caitlin.
So yeah, thank you guys so much for letting us join another call. For those of you that don't know, the PPAC is the OU Parent Partnership Advisory Committee, and we've been operating continuously for over 10 years, largely thanks to Jane Slofsky, Steve Ross, and LaShonda Stevens-Toteme. Our aim is to bring family voice and experiences to state and local agencies in order to enhance how these agencies support families with young children. As of right now, we have 7 members, 4 moms and 3 dads, and we're looking to recruit about 6 to 8 new members. That includes both moms and dads. Our application is now live, so I'll drop that in the chat. And we also have a recruitment flyer. If you want to share that with your families, I'll also put that in the chat. And I'm planning to send an email after this call with all of those materials as well. Another update, we're working on getting the application translated to Spanish, so that should be available next week for all Spanish-speaking families. And to get a better understanding of who we are, I'm going to let Tiana Hawkins, one of our new members, talk for just a few seconds. Let me make sure she's on.
I did not see her.
I don't see her either. I know sometimes she has trouble with their Zoom. So I'll just say Tiana joined us in the beginning of 2022. She's one of our newest members. Most of our other members have been a part of the PAC almost since the beginning. And she's really kind of brought a new energy to the group. We like having new members because it brings new thoughts, new ideas, new connections. And I'll just go ahead and, I have her permission, I'll share a picture of her and her daughter. Can you guys see that? Okay, so that is Tiana and her 3-year-old daughter, Taylor. And most of our families have multiple kids, but they have to have at least one child. So I will go ahead and put the application and the flyer in the chat. And if you guys have any questions, just let me know. As of right now, PPAC is virtual, but we're working on creating a hybrid method. So for those who want to meet in person, you can. And for those that it's just easier to meet us virtually, that'll be okay too.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, David, would you like to introduce Dr. McBride?
Yeah, and first, let me just on that last topic, echo Caitlin's comments that we really would like broader representation on the PPAC committee. So if you know of clients that you're working with, particularly from our PAT and our Children First programs, we would really like to invite them to be a part of that advisory council. And based on past experience, I think they would highly enjoy it. So a lot of the members of PPAC have been involved for multiple years now. And I think it's been mutually rewarding, certainly for our home visiting administrative body and our evaluation and research bodies to be able to interact with former clients of these programs, to pick their brains about where we've been and where we're headed. But I also think from their perspective too, being able to see some of the data and be on the ground floor of helping decide what projects and research questions we go after next has been beneficial from their perspective. Okay, yes, it is my pleasure to welcome back Dr. Bonnie McBride and Seth Kastner, 2 of our co-workers here in developmental behavioral pediatrics. You were introduced to these 2 individuals way back when we started the Learning Collaborative, and we were talking about ways to promote developmental monitoring in the home. And as you may recall, Dr. McBride is one of the ambassadors for the CDC's Learn the Signs Act Early program. She is the ambassador, I think, for our state or our region. So very knowledgeable on the history of those materials and their utility in all areas of early childhood, the early childhood profession. We wanted to hear from her yet again, now at the tail end of our learning collaborative, on some of the evolution of the field that's happened of late. Some of this was actually happening, I think, when we first invited her, but it was early stages. And now that several months have passed by, we were curious to hear her thoughts on implications for the field, and then any translation or applied utility here for our learning collaborative, and the work that you're doing in our home visiting programs, continuing to monitor development of the children of your clients, and then also provide your parents the tools they need to promote development in early learning. I'm not exactly sure what's on the docket. We gave her a few ideas, but then also said, hey, free reign, you get to decide. I think she might tell us a little bit about our core measure, the history of it, and some of the latest work that's been done. And I apologize, but Bonnie, Seth, we've been using select items from the Learn the Signs Act early materials from the milestone checklist. And we've also been using some items buried inside the Learn the Signs Act, the early Learn the Signs Act early materials on activities parents can engage in to promote development. Turn those into in-house questionnaires, essentially, to evaluate progress on our quality improvement projects for this learning collaborative, but then also more broadly looking at clients and families who are eligible for services but not receiving them, a comparison sample. What is their knowledge and what is their positive parenting practices, I'll call it, look like over the course of the last 18 months while we've been engaged in these activities. We selected those items before the latest literature came out and recommended some changes to how we score those items, or where we set particularly those developmental milestone expectations, and before some of the new items were proposed. So with that backdrop and background, welcome back, and please take it away.
Thank you. Yes, we're glad to be back, and just hopefully hear some updates from teams that were using Learn the Signs Act early materials or the app as part of their PSA. Did I get that right? Their
PDSA.
Okay, good. Yes.
You study that.
Yes. So your plans, which I thought we looked over them. I thought they were great. And I will say too that I recently returned from the yearly meeting we have at the CDC for this project, and shared some of the kind of target goals that you had for incorporating Learn the Signs Act early. They were really excited about it, that they were really excited about just the level of data and outcome data that you were collecting. So David, you might hear from them in the future. So anyway, so what we thought we would do is kind of keep this fairly informal. We'll give a quick little overview. I'm assuming we're all here, everyone here has seen the materials, used the materials. There have been some updates, as David had alluded to. They had undergone a pretty extensive process for, as they call it, evidence-informed updates to the developmental milestone checklists. And that's kind of the primary tool used for families and or providers to track development over time. And again, developmental monitoring is something anyone can do at any time. It's not, it's kind of the step before screening, and hopefully, keep the parents thinking about development and, talking with the provider about the development, and most importantly, talk about concerns if they have concerns, bringing those concerns up at the time rather than waiting to see down the road, which we know then misses some opportunities for early intervention, which are really important. So Seth, why don't you start with slide 12 on the PowerPoint that we have for the Southern Plains. And then Seth, would you mind taking over, just going over the changes?
Sure thing. I was already on slide 11, so.
See, we're thinking the same. So this is just to kind of make sure we're all remembering the materials. And so one of the things, so what the CDC undertook with a variety of professionals, kind of leading the team, was a developmental behavioral pediatrician. I'm blanking on her name right now, but there was probably, gosh, 12 or more people involved in reviewing all of the different ways that all the different tools out there for performing developmental either monitoring or screening. So they looked at all those tools that are available. They looked at the literature. We can put a link in the chat to the article that was published in Pediatrics that kind of goes very well into the process they went through for updating these milestones. So there were some kind of key changes that they made, and one of them was just the look of the checklist. So we thought we would just take a quick peek at that. Let's see. Oh, yes, there we go. So just reminding you that, again, this was, the purpose of this is to, work with families over time, tracking their child's development, bringing any concerns to their provider that they might have. And then, so here are some of the, they've updated the look of their materials. So they've changed the color scheme. You can see that we're using that here. One of the things I've always loved about this program is they do a lot of focus groups and vetting of materials with families ahead of time to see how acceptable they are to them. So I think, I think some of the updates they've made to the different colors and the photos that they use, making sure that they have a diverse representation of children and families, are kind of cool. So let's go to the next. Let's see, let's go to so here's the new look of the checklists. So you can see this is the 9-month-old checklist. Now Seth will talk about, they did add 2 more months or milestone checks, and he'll talk a little bit about that and why they did that. But you can see one of the primary changes that they made was there used to be a box on these checklists that had kind of red flags or things. If your child wasn't doing these things, you should talk to your physician or pediatrician. And if I understand correctly, David, you were using some of those items to kind of inform your tool that you were using. To see if families knew if their child wasn't meeting a milestone, which I think is a really clever way actually of testing that, kind of seeing what families know. Am I getting that right?
Yes, you're correct. So we have been contacting a comparison sample and then clients of home visiting programs and asking them these questions, we being the Health Science Center evaluation team. Some of the programs for their PDSAs, and it might help to know too, Bonnie and Seth, that in this process, we've gone through 3 action periods, so 3 separate PDSAs. We're finishing up our 3rd and final one now. For some of those PDSAs, programs have selected milestones as knowledge of milestones as a targeted outcome and developed either their own instrument or borrowed from some of the items that we were using for our overall evaluation.
Nice. So kind of complicated things a little bit for the team. So David contacted me about they removed those from the checklist. So now you can see that what they've done is actually incorporate the items into the checklist, the behaviors that you're looking for, that you want to see at different ages, as opposed to concerns. And again, Seth can talk a little bit more about why they chose to do that. But those items are still represented in, Seth, can you go to the next slide?
Yep.
are still represented in the checklists. So for instance, you know, in the field that Seth and I spend a lot of our time is in early identification of autism. And so if you were to look at the items here under social emotional milestones that you would expect the child to be meeting at 9 months, these are often behaviors that are absent in children who potentially may have autism. So again, the items that may have been, if the child isn't pointing, or if they're not, you know, using a social smile, or if they're not looking at you, you know, these are things, if they're not doing these things, go talk to your pediatrician or your provider right away. So instead of framing it that way, they've just used these, you know, if they're missing these milestones, then those are going to be clues to the parent and or the provider that they need to maybe follow up with something a little more specific. So those are so those are the checklists, and then moving on to the books. Now the books have not changed as of yet. They are in the process of updating the books, which are very popular. I don't know, we shared books with yes.
Did any of you get books? I know we had some orders in from some folks that we got to Lori.
Oh, we did. Yes, Lori got, we brought a big pile of them to her office. So hopefully you're using those and that you find them useful. They are, you know, but they still work for now. We're still using them too. I mean, the milestones are maybe worded a little bit differently in the new checklist, and they will update these and adding in the 2 extra months that they've added. But they're still relevant. They still work great, and we'll let people know as soon as we know when those are going to be released. So Seth, I'm going to turn it, if you want to go to the slides that talk about the changes that were made based on this extensive review of the literature, this panel of professionals who were experts in a variety of different fields, but early childhood focused fields, and really looking at making sure that these are research informed checklists, and this whole program was, you know, the way that they've structured the checklists were well documented as effective. So
yeah, so like we say, they're not the checklists, the design's a little different. Some of the items are a little different. They're largely very, very similar. So you won't have to, if you've used the previous ones, you won't have any trouble adjusting to using these. Essentially, what they were looking for when they were trying to, you know, make these updates, improve it, is that they found that if they kind of cast the net for a little bit too broadly for, you know, a lower percentage of children, if it was just closer to the average age at which a milestone was reached, it kind of sent a false sense of, you know, oh, it's, you know, it could just be because of natural differences in development, because we know that children do reach, and the Learn the Science Act early materials clearly talk about children reach milestones at different ages. But essentially they changed it so that it's basically more of a concern if a child hasn't reached the milestone. Previously, essentially, you know, if it's the median, which is kind of what they were at before, it's easy to say, oh, well, we won't worry about this. So now with basically at a higher percentile of children reaching these milestones at the given age, that will help with making sure that when a milestone is missed, it's viewed as more significant.
Right. And so, yeah, just kind of getting away from the idea of percentiles, because I think we all know what those mean, and more looking at, you know, actually percentage of kids that would meet that milestone at that age. And so they arrived at, I think, 75%. So 75% of children will reach that milestone in this on their checklist at that age. So if they're missing milestones, you can be pretty confident that it's worth looking into from there.
Yeah. Because again, if it's around that more on that 50-50 area, it's
Yeah.
much easier to dismiss them as just normal variations, just what they're trying to get at. So the other thing with the checklists is the previous checklists, were based on and written by experts in development, but they actually did work to make it a little bit more data driven and kind of systematic with how they kind of validated the different milestones for the different ages. So that's the other big change.
And they added two new months because they wanted to make sure that it lined up with well child visits in the doctor's office.
Yeah, previously they skipped over 15 and 30. So now there's 12 checklists rather than 10, I think.
Right.
Yeah,
Any
so
questions? Any questions about that and kind of that? Yeah, here are the changes. Sorry.
Yeah, the other stuff that we didn't already mention were specifically, we in our example that we looked at, social emotional was highlighted because they put in deliberate work on those, especially at younger ages. That's the thing that, kind of, especially when they were originally written, social emotional stuff for really little kids is very different. The social life and emotional life of a 15-month-old is a lot different than a 3-year-old. But they did a really good job of figuring out how to have some stuff that's still tied to that domain for even young kids. And then essentially just making it a little bit more readable, make sure that it's clear to people, all backgrounds and reading levels, and some duplicates.
Yeah.
Bonnie mentioned this previously, but now they don't, and this had a lot to do with kind of the idea of kind of the messaging and the perception of these, again, not as something that's a list of red flags. And this goes along with a lot of stuff that we're kind of shifting away from, and that a lot of the early childhood and developmental disabilities community is going away from, is kind of being consistent with talking about, in this case, positive things in a literal sense, things that you can actually observe, because a lot of the red flags and warnings could also be absences of things. And essentially, they're not separating it out and saying these, because again, that can give the false concern, the false complacency for if you see a list and it's like all this list of things, and then they've got this danger box to the side, that's what people focus on, and they won't see the main milestones, which is the core content. They won't take that as seriously. So now it's all integrated together. There's no red flags.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah. So there are some ways that they are the same. Of course, they're free up to a certain number. So that's something that we're hoping as we work with different agencies, that they may consider looking at their budgets and including in their budgets purchasing some of the materials or printing some of the materials that are available. But they are free. You can get PDFs of all of them. You can customize them. That stuff is all the same. And one of the things that's really exciting recently, I think this has happened since we met with you all before, they have now have 3 tribal ambassadors, and they're working with the Southern Plains Health,
Southern Plains Tribal Health
Yes.
Board.
Southern Plains Tribal Health Board. I never can remember. And they're in the process of updating all of the checklists and printed materials to be culturally relevant for tribal communities. So that's pretty cool. So we're really excited to see what those, what they look like, kind of how they do that. So that's something, if you're interested in that, we can connect you with the new tribal ambassadors that Seth and I meet with regularly to kind of coordinate our efforts. And they're also learning about the materials themselves right now, but they're a great resource as far as how those will be updated. Anyone have any questions or comments? Oh, Seth, did you have something else?
I was just going to show an example of, we talked about the idea of customizing these materials. That's something we're able to assist with as well. This is an example. It might just look like any other checklist, but you can see here at the bottom, we actually have Crossroads Youth and Family Services, their logo, their contact information. So these are the versions of these checklists that they're actually using. So they can distribute them not only with current families, but even as part of their outreach efforts. Health fairs, things like that, so that it can be a way that if people have concerns, they can help them with those. So it's got specific contact information, things like that. Because otherwise it's pretty general, it's like, see or talk to your pediatrician. Whereas if we customize these for use locally, we can give your contact information or specific information. For instance, as we've done stuff like this with Sooner Start, as well as the Chickasaw Nation, we customize materials for them, that information for their providers on it as well. So just another example of a way that these can be used.
Does anyone have any questions or comments about what we've talked about? I know you've all been using, yes.
I dropped that journal article into the chat.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it does a really good job of explaining the process they went through. It was interesting because there was a lot of concern when it was first released, and a lot of concern, particularly from specific,
physical and occupational therapists.
Yes, OTs, PTs, especially. So these, more targeted professionals in these areas about how some of the milestones that they left off of the checklist. And why they did that. And, so for instance, you won't see on there, is your child crawling? Because not that that's not an important skill, but it may not be a necessary milestone to development, I guess is.
Yeah, and I think that also comes from the fact that they were more systematic in these revisions and actually looked at data on which things ended up actually being most important for catching potential delays. And that can be a combination of things. Like there are some things that, for instance, without crawling, that in many cases is going to be noticed and acknowledged and dealt with on its own. It's like almost like you don't need a milestones checklist for that. That one's kind of intuitive in a way that makes sense. Whereas other milestones are better at finding those kids who otherwise would not get that follow-up in those services. So it's kind of just more targeted on those things that the data shows are effective at getting kids who need to be followed up with on these developmental issues.
So if we don't have any burning questions or comments, I thought it'd be fun to share some data. We've been working a lot with Crossroads Youth and Family Services and their Head Start programs. And one of the projects that we've done recently with the CDC folks is to really look at, they refer to it as levels of integration. And I think, it kind of maps on well with thinking about like implementation science, like how much a part of a program a new practice becomes, so that it's just something that is done now, and we can all think about things as part of our organizations that we work for that we don't even think about, we just do automatically now because it's a part of our program. So they've been looking at ways and strategies for, increase, kind of deeper levels of integration, I guess is the way to think of it. So we've been working with Youth and Family Services to kind of try out some of those ways to integrate it more holistically into their program. So one thing that they adopted was all of their staff, as part of the onboarding process, watch the MIECHV training, which is available on the website, but it talks about developmental milestones, how you work with families to track those, just an overview. And it was designed specifically for early childhood providers. So any of you who work with early childhood providers, whether that's Head Start or childcare, that it's a really great training for those folks. So they all have to watch, everyone watches it, including the people who do, lunch and transportation and everyone. So that's part of the onboarding process. And then they have a web page. So Seth can pull up kind of something to look, and you saw the checklist that's been customized using their information and who to call. And they've integrated the use of the checklist into their required home visits as part of Head Start. And so those are the data that Seth's going to show you. And that is what they do is they have each of the providers either has the family fill out the checklist at the age that the child is, that's most appropriate for that child at that point in time. And the parent fills out the checklist and the provider fills out the checklist, or they fill it out together. And they review those data together, they review those checklists together and talk about any kind of next steps. Seth, do you have those?
Yeah, they're ready to go.
Okay. Do you want to?
So Bonnie already kind of mentioned the general gist. This is actually our initial pilot. We're still waiting on the data from the latest round because we started back like a year and a half ago with piloting this in one county. Crossroads serves multiple counties around the state. And we started with just one county, 7 sites specifically, but now they've rolled this out to every one of their sites. Like I said, the information about the app as well. I know some of you guys had talked about using the app to basically with the results from this, and we're excited to get more data in the next few weeks because we've got some really detailed stuff. That's one of the amazing things about this is that there's been a lot of buy-in from the organization and they've been very enthusiastic about this because it says a lot when you've had your lead person that's working to implement this leave and get replaced twice. So we've had turnover with so we've worked with 3 different people on this and the project's still going. In a lot of cases, initiatives like this, somebody leaves, it's just, dead in the water. But essentially we found, that the developmental checklists were largely, there were a subset of families that didn't really engage. This is from a parent survey. Most of them didn't use the app. There were a handful and it kind of mirrors the checklist. Some people prefer the app, some people prefer the checklist. So that's a big recommendation, is to make families aware of and have access to both. And then the vast majority of them, like I said, these aren't percentages, these are actual numbers of families, found them helpful in understanding their child's development and knowing milestones. So that was just kind of their report. We didn't actually do any fancy outcome measures on this. We just asked them if it did help, and they said it did. For the teachers, we saw, like I say, there were a couple. I think there was literally in this case one teacher that didn't really enjoy it. But for the most part, we had a pretty good mix of people saying that it was moderately useful for helping them talk to their child about the development. That's another aspect of this that we always emphasize, is that it's not just about the milestones themselves, it's about engaging with the family around that. And the milestones can make this much easier for providers to have those discussions. Because the provider may already have concerns, or this checklist might have brought up concerns, and this is kind of a mechanism for them to have those discussions. We had a mix. Again, we prefer the completing it with them together is kind of a nice thing in most of our minds, because again, it's something that makes it more hands-on and helps with those conversations rather than just the family completing it independently. But in both cases here, they were having follow-up with the providers afterwards. So the families were bringing back the completed checklist. So that's totally valid as well. And the teachers, 95% of them found it totally manageable. That was one thing we were worried about because we know providers are very busy and don't want to have too much burden on them. And then we actually did see them reporting that they were detecting missed milestones. So more than 69% of teachers were saying that that was happening with some of their students. And like I said, we were interested in how much they brought up the app. So 75%, 76%. But again, I think what we are trying to encourage now is kind of dual use of both modalities, the app and the paper checklists, just because they are going to be more about, one will be more valuable than the other to any given family, and making sure that there's options for both of those.
And then Seth and I just recently met with the coordinator who's kind of leading this for the Crossroads team. And this time around, they just used them in the fall home visit. And the increase in the number of kids they were going to refer for potential, services had dramatically increased. And I know, and it makes sense because, we had the pandemic. I think a lot of people that work with young children now have concerns about, potential delays because kids have been, maybe more isolated or not around peers as much. So that was interesting. But I think one of the points that she made, what I thought was really telling, is she said before, Head Start, as all of you know who work with Head Starts, they're required to have 10% of their population with special needs, and they've never met that percentage criteria. And now they've been able to identify potential kids in their program that probably do qualify for services, but just haven't ever been identified through this process of checking milestones. And I know, they're required to do development, screening too. And they do that, but I think they're seeing that they're able to pick up a little bit sooner on some of those potential delays with this regular monitoring. So, any questions, comments? So yeah, so stay tuned. We should have those data that from Crossroads soon.
That's terrific. Thank you so much, Bonnie and Seth. David, would you like to next go to talking about the Positive Parenting app or and an update on that, or would you like to go to the PDSA summaries from Oklahoma City C1 and Parent Promise?
I think the latter, but just let me briefly give a verbal update
Yes.
on the parenting app. And before I do that, thank you, Bonnie and Seth, for joining
Yes.
and presenting that update to us. And I took notes there as you were going through some of the milestone changes that were made. Thank you. And just FYI too, when those books are available, the revised ones that you had mentioned, will you let us know? Because I think there'll probably be some more demand for those. Those were widely used, and most of the programs, in fact, incorporated that into one of their PDSAs at one stage or another. Okay, parenting app study. So I think the last time we met, I gave you an update and showed you the dashboard, which was in its infancy. We were doing what's called beta testing at that stage. We had enrolled a few clients from some of our Safe Care programs. They were utilizing the app for up to a month, and we gathered some feedback from them through the app itself, through the home visiting providers, and then we reached out to them directly and gathered some information. We learned a lot of lessons. There were a lot of bumps in the road there, but we learned a lot of problems with how the app operates and how the study is operationalized. And we made some rapid changes, and then kickstarted just a week and a half ago, the second part of this study phase, what we're calling now the crossover trial. This is the actual trial phase with two separate groups. There are clients who are randomized to see the parenting tips in the first 2 weeks within the app. And then the second 2 weeks that they have the app installed, they're simply filling out a daily survey on parenting activities and child behavior. The reverse is happening for the other half of the clients. So they're in a condition where the first 2 weeks, they just do our survey. The second 2 weeks, they get these parenting tips. So we will show you at some stage, I know it was on the agenda today, but we're running out of time. At some point, we will show you what this app looks like with a demo. I had that queued up ready to go, but I'm going to hit pause on that again, just so we can hear from the other programs and get a sense of how some of these other PDSAs are going that do not involve the parenting app.
Thank you. Why don't we go first to Sarah Young? Are you the one presenting for Oklahoma City C1?
Yes, I'll be
Okay.
presenting today.
Thank you, Sarah.
So, yeah, good afternoon, everybody. So just briefly to kind of summarize where we are, I'm going to put up, let me share my screen really fast. To just kind of show a little bit of our current data. So we, kind of similar to last time, are instead of looking at typical development, we're looking at atypical development, but really looking at workforce development. We have a lot of new nurses, and so we've been focusing in about just their comfort level with assessing atypical development, and then also their knowledge base with atypical development. So we've had quite a few really good learning sessions that we've been doing monthly. Our most recent one, we had someone that came from Sooner Start that gave just some really good information about things to watch for with atypical development and all of that. So you can see kind of here with our graphs that we're definitely making strides, and our goal was to have a 10% increase with our questionnaire that we have them fill out that has some questions about their comfort level and their knowledge level. So our SMART aim was to increase the knowledge and comfort with atypical child development by an average of 10%. And so we've had our trainings monthly. And like I said, we have a questionnaire that they fill out. One of the things that we've tried to implement this go around is actually recording our sessions. So if a nurse misses that training, they are able to listen to that recording. So we have been able to do that with one of our sessions so far, and that's been helpful to allow our nurses with that information. So so far everything's been going well, and we're happy with our progress. So Lisa, I don't know if that answers all the things, if that's good, or.
Yeah, I think that's terrific. Thank you so much. Does anybody have any quick questions for Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, the data you just had on the screen is fascinating. So what led to those changes exactly? Can you say more about your change idea?
Yeah, so with our, with those changes, I mean, really, like I said, we have so many nurses who are new in our program within, just the last year and a half. And so I think that we've just had some really valuable learning sessions. And I think that has really helped increase the nurses' comfort levels and knowledge just by being able to really focus in on what atypical development looks like and how to assess those things. And so I think we've just been lucky, and we've had really good speakers that have given good education to really help us get the results that we're looking for.
You gave a good example in our rounding call about how one of your presenters talked about, for instance, how a child may show a problem with learning, but hasn't had their hearing assessed. And that how a hearing deficit could be what's really responsible, and it may not have anything to do with the child's intellectual abilities.
Yeah.
So that kind of reminder, I think, sounds really valuable.
Has just been, I think, just making our nurses familiar with things to watch for and things to assess for. So.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sarah. Now let's go to Alicia Ramirez from Parent Promise. Are you the one who's going to be talking today?
Yes. Yes, I am. So this time around, we've decided to do what is diaper time is talk time, we were wanting to increase parent-child interaction and kind of taking advantage. I mean, they're already going to interact with their child when changing the diaper and trying to figure out what benefits, what else can we do during that time. And so the feedback that I've gotten from the girls doing the questions and the activities with the families, the parent educators, have come back and really said that it's something that a lot of families are already doing. And I think it just is really helpful to explain to the families what those benefits are. They're not really realizing, that they just know that they're playing or they're singing, but whenever the parent educator goes a little bit more into depth as far as what baby is getting out of that and how that is affecting their development, parents seem to be doing it a little bit more. And so, parents are practicing and they're singing and they're, talking about whatever decor they might have on the wall or, parallel talk. And so just a lot of the benefits and things. And so it's been really cool to see that parents are really enjoying the activities that, the parent educators are bringing to them. And we're trying to incorporate the activities from the diaper time is talk time to the curriculum, which they pretty much go hand in hand. There's a lot of activities that are pretty much the same. So trying to, not figure out, I got to figure out an activity, plus I've got to talk about this. It just kind of goes together. So it just has also made it pretty easy on the parent educators as far as planning as well. And so it seems to be going very well so far.
All right, fantastic, Alicia. And any questions for Alicia? Okay, I'd also like to thank the analysts who are working with them this semester, Shalyn Liao and Andrew Peters. David, we have 11 minutes left. Do you want to look at that video for a little bit?
Yeah, I'd be happy to pull that up. Okay, so it's a lengthy video. This is we call it the user's guide, and this is how we get the clients started with the app. It's also a nice reminder to our staff of how to set up a phone, and so it's got some content in here that I think is less applicable to the group. I'm going to try to fast forward through those sections and really just concentrate on the content in the app that we want the parents to see and that we think are drivers here of change. Let me share my screen. Okay, if I remember right, I have to somehow share my computer audio with you. Somebody knows how to do that, shout it out, because I always forget.
I think it's before you start to share. I think you have to.
When you click,
I think
yeah, you click share. When you click share screen, there should be two options in the bottom left
To stream the audio.
Okay, we'll try this. I think I found it. It said share sound, and I clicked that button. I need to go to the 340 mark here. All right, so I'm skipping a lot of the setup portion of this. But it is an app. You install it on your phone. One major downside at this stage, although we're happy to announce that we're seeking funding for a follow-up parenting app study that will expand on some of the content I'm going to show you today that's currently in the app. But it will also allow us to develop the app not only on an Android device, but on an iOS device. So those of you that have been working with us know that this has been a big bugaboo because way more people have devices these days than not. Times have changed. We did some of your clients, and it was the other way around. Android was by far and away the most popular device, but that has changed. And it's been a major limitation. So we've had to rethink how we run this study. We bought more Android phones of our own, and we've been loaning those out. So anyway, we figured a way around it, and I'm happy to announce that that will no longer be a limitation for future studies. At present, everything's on an Android device. And where am I starting here? I'm going to show you, starting the study. Yeah. So when they first started, let's see.
So to initiate your,
Can you hear that? Yes, okay. I think our trusty graduate research assistant here is going to talk you through what I want to say. So I'm going to be quiet for a little bit, but I'll pause it along the way if there's any other pertinent information that might help.
participation in the study, we'll click this Start Stage module here. First, we'll answer a question. How old is the youngest child in your home between the ages of 12 and 72 months? And then to proceed, we'll click the forward arrow in the bottom right. And then next, you'll give us consent to start the study by clicking yes. And then that forward arrow again to proceed. And so now we'll see that we move to the next stage automatically. And here we have example modules for the tips and the example modules for the assessment that you will take throughout this study. And so for our tips, we'll click on that module now on the top. This is just one example of a tip that you'll receive during this study. Again, these are just examples. And please note that you will not receive parenting tips for the first 2 weeks of your study participation. And I'll just click on the tip again so we can see varieties of the tips that we might receive during this study. And so again, just examples, and starting week 3, you will start receiving these tips once in the morning, once in the afternoon, every day of the study. This tip disappears after 15 minutes, and you don't need to advance the screen. It will do so on its own. Starting week 3, after you have read the tip, you can hide the app by pressing the rounded square icon at the bottom center of the screen. And so we're done with the tips. Those are just examples. You can look at those before you actually set your routines that you're going to experience in week 3. And now we'll look at the example assessment survey that you'll also complete every day of the study. So I'm going to click on that now, this second one. And this is just letting you know that you're going to answer some questions about your child, and then press OK. And you can look at all these items, and you'll notice that some of them include multiple choice, checkbox here, and even some open-ended response option formats. And if nothing applies to an open-ended item, you can just include.
Okay, I'm going to pause it there. So we go through this assessment. They get it every day. We borrowed a lot of the items from a recent parenting app study. It has a slightly different focus. It was for kids with ADHD, but I put in the chat the link to that paper if you're curious. And we go through 15 questions here about parent engagement and positive parenting activities with a child, and then also some child behavioral items. It takes your participants, your clients, or anybody with the app about 5 minutes to fill that out for the first time. And then every time they fill it out after that, it speeds up pretty fast. So by the end, when you're filling this out, usually it takes 2 minutes or less. Okay, I'm going to fast forward, and you saw example tips. Those are actually general tips that we've been toying around with as added content that we'd like to pursue in future versions of the app. For now, we've been a little bit more specific in the tips that we've been offering, and I'm going to show you an example of that in the next segment here. I need to fast forward to 7:17. Okay, so at this stage in the process, our research techs will have gone through these examples with your client, and they're just about ready to get started.
And now we're actually going to go to this third module here labeled routines for week 3, where we will see the tips that you receive in the morning and the afternoon for when you actually start receiving these tips, which are in week 3 of the study. So we'll click that now. And
so you see in front of you here, there are 8 categories. We have a set of tips for each one of these categories. And these are morning tips or morning categories. The next segment here is going to show you the evening categories. There's a little bit of overlap for obvious reasons. You might give a bath time in the morning or in the evening, for example. So they could choose that in either the morning or the evening to concentrate on. They're always going to get 2 tips a day, one in the category they selected for the morning and one in the category they selected for the evening.
And here you want to choose the type of activity we want to focus on in the morning first. So let's say, for example, you want to focus on diapering and toileting. And so I'll select that and move forward by clicking the forward arrow in the bottom right. And then now you will choose the daily afternoon and evening activity that we want to focus on here, which, for example, might be bedtime. And so we're going to lock in the routines we want to see and work on for week 3. And remember that the routines you select here will correspond to those tips that you will receive in week 3. They'll be tailored to the specific routines you set now. So now you've done that. Those are the routines you will work on starting week 3. And you'll see that that just went away. That means we transition to week 1 of the study, where we will only receive notifications to complete the survey each day. That's what
It went fast there, but I don't know if you noticed. So that was a brief demonstration of when they do get to this, the weeks where tips are arriving, which now, again, half of the clients, they get this right away. They see it their first 2 weeks. The other half, they do have to wait for that 3rd and 4th week. Once they reach that stage, though, they get a notification on the phone that, hey, it's time to view your parenting tip. They choose yes, we hope. And then they get to see that tip, which was the next screen. Oops, it went so fast, it was hard to see. Try to give your child a few extra hugs today. This is another one of the more general tips that, again, we're playing around with for future versions. But that's the general idea. I know it's sweet and short and sweet and simple in its implementation, but our hope is that it's a nice complement to the parent-child interaction curriculum built into your home visiting programs. I know I've said this before, but it's probably worth repeating that the tips are categorized into broad areas of focus according to the parent activities training modules of Safe Care. So I know that it's heavily oriented toward the Safe Care program, but we think broadly applicable to any home visiting program. And in fact, our LCDA PAT program is currently using this. All right, I'm getting a gentle reminder that we're out of time here, but that's the gist of it. And I will just quickly fast forward and show you a screenshot here. You saw this on the screen earlier, on-demand content. We do have links to other parenting websites that we think parents would want to take advantage of. You'll notice the second one there, it's labeled LTS, that's for Learn the Signs and Act Early. So it takes you to the CDC web pages that you're all very familiar with now. Parenting Pro you know of as well. We also have the Harvard Center for the Developing Child. A lot of their content is available in that third on-demand icon. And then the last one is for Talking is Teaching. Again, a program that you guys are very familiar with. So, all right, we did.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody. We appreciate your time. Y'all have a good day.
Okay, thank you.